Welcome to Unmuted Nation, and welcome back to day two of Black Woman Hear Me. Okay, so if you are just tuning in to the nation for the first time, we are here every day in the Boss FM radio app. You can download it from your app store. We're live at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific time every single day. And the nation is a place that we come together and we start conversations that should be continued. And so when you come to the nation on day one, you may be visiting, but the next day you're a part of the nation. And we kicked off the Black Woman Hear Me series yesterday. And Courtney happened yesterday, and today we continue these conversations with Black women, learning about their perspectives, truths, and gaining an understanding of who they are. Too often, we as Black people are considered as monolithic, and when we did the first series, Black Man Hear Me, we found that that was just not true. And so, most of all, I'm interested in understanding things that we don't understand, and we do that by taking a deep dive into the truth about who Black women are. And so, whether you are a Black woman or a Black man or somebody that is interested in learning about Black people, this series is for you because it's all about the truth about who we are and how we've become who we are. And so without delaying that, today the format's going to be a little bit different. I have three phenomenal women joining me. And after I talk to each of them individually, we'll have a collective conversation. And so tell somebody you know to tune in, share this. Of course, if you miss any part, it will be available in the Boss FM radio app and also available for you to watch at any time once the series is complete. All right, so that app is in your app store. Make sure if you want to take part in the conversation, it's happening live on Twitter right now. Use the hashtag BWHM. Okay, without further ado, Dr. Kanene Ubesi is joining me. And Dr. Ubesi, welcome to Unmuted Nation.
Hi guys, how are you?
Hey, how are you?
I'm well. I'm doing great. I'm highly favored.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you're well, and I'm well, and hopefully this conversation will go well. I don't have any doubt that it will. First and foremost, thank you for joining the series. We couldn't do this without you deciding to be a part of it, and so thank you so much for doing that. And before we jump into everything, I always like to do like a deep dive. And so if you want to just tell me just a little bit about where you're from, where you grew up, and what you're doing now, we'll start there and keep it moving.
Well, I would first like to say that I am a child of God. I was born and raised. I was born and raised in H-Town, Houston, Texas. Big ups to all my H-Town, Houston folks. I was born to two wonderful Nigerian parents who came to the United States at the young ages of 19 and 22 to shoot for the American dream. So I'm first generation Nigerian. I lived in Texas most of my life. I went to college at UT Austin, Hookham, and I went to medical school in San Antonio, and then I did all my training in surgery in Virginia. I am fellowship trained in burn surgery and wounds. I'm also fellowship trained in surgical critical care, but my base training is general surgery. I practiced as a general surgeon in Dallas, Texas for a couple of years, and then I found my love in trauma surgery, and now I'm an acute care surgeon. What that means is that I do a whole genre of specialties within the field of surgery. I do trauma, which is anything that acutely injures the body. I'm a trauma surgeon, true at heart. And I do general surgery, run-of-the-mill general surgery, removing gallbladders, removing appendices, removing hernias, fixing hernias. And I'm also a critical care surgeon. So anybody that gets fairly sick and is a high threat to life, I take care of them as well. And then if you have burns, if you have chronic wounds, I'm your girl.
Wow. What a background. And I'm grateful to talk to you today. And then thanks for taking the time from your busy schedule just to kind of participate in this. As a first generation, and I don't think as part of the series, we haven't talked to any first generation Americans yet.
Oh, wow.
My first question for you is, because this question is integral, it's an integral part of the conversation. And so as a first generation American, the foundations are are probably very root, like culturally rooted. And when you well, my first question for you is when you came. Well, when was the first time that you realized or recognized that you were in fact not just a first generation American or someone with Nigerian parents, but actually a Black woman in America?
That's interesting you say that. I mean, I always knew I was a first generation child, Nigerian American, because my parents were rooted in strong faith, success, intelligence, and just going after what you want. I mean, they're true Nigerians, and their support and their encouragement got me to where I am today. But I actually didn't realize that I was really Black until I was in medical school. And I was actually racially targeted from one of my classmates who was a Caucasian female. And that was that was back in 2006. And that was truly, I realized, oh my gosh, I'm Black and my skin color actually matters how people treat me. And it's even worse in the medical field. My parents always taught me and raised me to see everyone as an equal. Everyone is your equal. Doesn't matter what color they are, doesn't matter what background they are. They're human beings. They still bleed the same color that you do. So you respect everybody and you honor everybody. So that's how I was raised.
Gotcha.
And it wasn't until I was into the society of the world that I realized, not everybody thinks like that.
Yeah, so it didn't really happen until you were integrated, and so it didn't happen for you until you got into medical school.
Mm-hmm.
And when it first happened, how did you react to that? Like what was if you don't mind talking about the situation of or what happened that caused you to like take a step back and say, now wait a minute, my Black is
right here.
What's going on? It's a little different.
Well, so I would like, before I go into that, I would like to say when you can really tell the story without being emotionally affected by it or without crying about it, that's when you know you're over it. And it took me a while to be able to express and verbalize how I felt and how the situation affected me physically, emotionally, mentally. So today I'm strong enough and I've gotten through that obstacle to be able to share that story with everyone. At the time I was devastated. I could not believe, it just didn't make sense. I was just like, how can someone judge me just because I'm a different skin color than them? We read the same books, we think the same way, we speak the same way, but because I'm darker than this person, I'm the guilty one. That just went over my head. And my dad, and my mom really tried to shield me from those emotions and those experiences, but they couldn't shield me from this. And they were devastated that I was devastated because they were just like, we're sorry, this is the world. And, we're here for you. We're going to support you. We're going to be behind you. Even my siblings and, my parents was just like, this is how the world is. But I was truly devastated.
Sure. Did you feel like shielded is a good way to describe what happens to a lot of people. And the shell shock happens too often for people when they become adults. Do you feel like without the shielding, things would have been a little different, or you would have perceived that first experience any differently?
I think I would have mentally and emotionally handled it differently. I'm not sure if I could have prevented the situation because I was not at fault. But I think that how I responded to the situation might have been a little bit better, I would say.
Sure. So I think it's really interesting to hear that. Some of my closest friends are first generation Americans, and they describe some of the same experiences and shock at that when that first experience happens. As a med student, or were you ever under the impression, and this is a curiosity question for me, that your credentials would take some of that I'm different or those feelings that other people have in those situations away?
Actually, I didn't even consider that. And actually, my credentials, being a physician and being at a higher level profession, actually enunciates or accentuates those racial disparities.
Sure.
The higher you get into the professional field, the more of racial disparities that you actually see, which is astounding.
I'm extremely curious about some of your experience as a practicing physician And we'll get into this a little further in the conversation. Have you ever experienced opposition while doing your job? Like for someone not wanting to interact with you because you were a Black woman, or not trusting your opinion, or not even believing your credentials or qualifications. Have you experienced that?
Oh yes, every day. And this is an ongoing thing. And actually, as we get into the current climate, it's getting worse. I've had patients tell me, I don't want to be seen by the N word. I've had patients look at me. You know, I'm a Black female physician, and I look younger than my age.
Right.
So I've had a lot of patients distrust me off the bat. As soon as I walk into the room, they're just like, you can't be the doctor. I have PAs and NPs that kind of work with me, and they'll assume those PAs are the physician because they're male, white, and tall, you know, and older. And so I have to constantly, when I come into the room, I have to introduce myself as, hello, I'm Dr. So-and-so. I have to dress like this. I have to make sure that I have all the paraphernalia of a physician. Even still, I'm seen as the janitor, the transporter, which is they're perfectly good jobs, but you know, I've worked too hard to get to where I've gotten to not be able to be recognized for what I worked for.
You know, and thank you for sharing that. There are so many people that, and on both sides of the conversation, that believe that the credentials kind of take some of that away, or that people would never discount or distrust or try to disparage you in any way because you've gotten these credentials, and especially I would say in my experience, a lot of times part of the reason as a Black American, we're often taught to seek these credentials is to garner the respect. And so people are often shocked, but the part of the reason that we want to have this conversation is to show people that it still happens. When you outside of the workplace, outside of the professional atmosphere, how have you found that you've been able to kind of cope, especially as things have started to heighten, and the tension is heightened? How have you been able to cope?
So as a resident and a medical student, finances, you basically don't have any coins whatsoever. So you have to find very abstract ways to kind of cope mentally and emotionally. I found that physical fitness has been my best friend. I typically tell people my therapist lives in the gym because that was where I was able to kind of, act out my frustrations and disappointments and sadness, and it really helped. And then my waist was snatched to boot. So, but I would say though, I would highly encourage if you can afford it. And there's also a lot of payment plans that people can get into, and also charitable organizations that offer therapy for people that are going through these type of emotions that are related to racial disparities. I would highly, highly recommend getting a therapist. Therapy is so undervalued, and people don't understand that therapy is a really strong, thing to do for your mental, physical, and emotional well-being.
Sure. So interesting and very intriguing. If you would stay with us just for a minute, I'm going to bring you back in just a minute. I want to get some of the other ladies in just to do the introductions, and we're going to jump right back into that, because I think that even the word therapy, so many people are afraid of it, and they believe that it somehow signifies weakness. And so before we jump into that, our next guest is Iris Crawford. Iris, thanks for joining Unmuted Nation. Welcome to Unmuted Nation.
Thank you. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm good.
Iris, where are you from?
So originally I'm from New York City, but now I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. And similarly to Dr. Ubese, I'm also a first generation Guyanese American. So you have two today on this show.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. That excites me, because I think we really have no idea who's going to be here, and the backgrounds are always interesting to me. As a first generation American, would you say that your experiences kind of mirror Dr. Ubese's, or were they a little different?
I think a little bit different just because growing up as well, Guyana is unique. It's geographically in South America but culturally Caribbean, and
Okay.
growing up as a Caribbean in New York City is its own very specific experience
I
in
recently
itself.
learned that. I'm new to New
Yeah.
York City, so I've been here a little over 3 years, and
Okay.
so the culture is definitely
It's very, yeah. So you
alive
know
and
what I'm
well.
talking about.
Yeah,
Yeah. So I think blackness and my culture has always been around me no matter what. And I think my parents did a good job of always taking me to visit Guyana, appreciate the food, the culture, the intersections between all of that. So I think my experience as a first generation has been really unique, and I'm grateful for it. Yeah, especially growing up in New York City, where you have the world at your fingertips. So
sure,
it's been a
sure.
unique upbringing.
And I imagine so. And that's also a different dynamic that kind of plays into you seeing yourself probably more often than not, in not just regular spaces that you're in, but maybe from school to the
Mhm.
workplace. It wasn't uncommon for you to encounter people that understood you and understood your culture.
Yeah, I do think Guyana is like the low key of the Caribbean,
Okay.
compared to like Jamaica or Trinidad and Tobago or some of the other islands. But my elementary and middle school was heavily black. We had a mix of cultures, people from all across the Caribbean, Haiti, and so forth. My high school was pretty good in terms of diversity, but it wasn't that diverse in terms of black people.
Sure.
And then college at Syracuse, the diversity was yeah. So, but I think again, like having the experience of being like rooted in my own culture, it was never an issue for me in terms of like understanding who I am and where I my place here in society as a black woman. So.
Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about reception because I think it's good that you felt comfortable and that you felt accepted in this place. Do you feel, or and a question that I like to ask anyone, whether they are descendants of slaves in America or a first generation American, is there a time that you have felt the systemic oppression towards black and brown bodies in this country in your own life?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I could definitely say, like, for example, unfortunately, I'm trying to think back to a specific instance. Um, that's like a tough thing. Yeah, no, I'm thinking of. So I was able to go to university on a scholarship through poetry,
Okay.
and a lot of the students of color at Syracuse were like either posse scholars or something of the kind. And so when we had a new chancellor, a lot of those like cuts affected scholarships, and a lot of the money went into like changes in infrastructure.
Sure.
So just, seeing like a lot of students of color not being able to have those opportunities to be able to come was something that I always thought about. And even when I was interning down south a couple years ago, um, in Meridian, Mississippi, there were still like KKK, like, I don't want to say headquarters, but
Basically.
membership bases and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
Mississippi is really a lot. They're still working a lot of things out, and as we see today, there's tons of changes happening in Mississippi today. I'm interested in your experience there, and even your perspective on as being because I think the generation or the perspective has to be different for someone that's a first generation American. And I think even maybe the understanding of was there ever a misunderstanding, especially once you left New York City and went to a place like Mississippi, that maybe something that you were taught or assumed about this country wasn't necessarily true for everyone?
hmm. I don't think it happened to me, but I think it happened when I went to South Africa and being a African, people consider me an African American. Um, so there were a lot of stereotypes on what people thought African Americans did, or our names, or like what, our behaviors and stuff like that. Um, so, just like the perceptions of African Americans on TV for like the global audience compared to like when you're actually like living in this country was always very interesting.
Okay.
Just coming across various different Black people in South Africa, um, talking one about your accent or like you go to school, um, things that you're into, all that kind of stuff. So I would say that, even though African American culture is global, there is definitely still some misunderstanding about who we are and our place. So, but I think living here in the Bay, um, there isn't that much Caribbean culture. Most of the Black people here are descendants from the South, have heritage in the South. Um, so I am still searching for that Caribbean community, if I had to
Okay.
be honest. Yeah.
Sure. You said something that kind of caught my ear, and you said that when I just asked about the disparities that you may have seen that you wouldn't have expected, you said it didn't really happen to you. Do you think that your perception is? Do you ever? Well, would you think that your perception is different just because of the way that you view the country, or do you think that you can see it more clearly with others and maybe not as clear with yourself?
Yeah. I guess it's the way in which I'm thinking about it and
Okay.
reflecting on my experience. Like, because to view, to talk about whatever adversity you faced, or, disparities that you have maybe noticed personally, I guess maybe it's something that I really don't even want to reflect on and even like talk about. And I'm
Got
sure
it.
I can like, upon deeper reflection, I'm sure I can like give you a better answer.
Sure.
But I think like that's what makes my experience unique. So I'm sure, but it's
No,
hard to answer.
absolutely, and
Yeah.
I'm actually intrigued. I don't want to. I'm not going to press it, but I'm intrigued because there's such an assumption, right? All the time, people feel like if you speak on a certain issue, maybe you're speaking based on something that didn't happen to you or something that you were expecting to happen. And people find themselves in like really, really interesting situations. And so for you to say that I've seen it, it hadn't happened to me, sometimes that's just a result of you saying to yourself, like, this is not going to happen to me. And I think, and I wanted to know your thoughts on it because it's interesting. There's a lot of people that may disagree with your own perspective about yourself, which is, I think, us having the conversation is really, really helpful. Iris, I'm so happy that you're here. And if you would just stick with me, I got one more lady that I want to bring to the table, and we want to get talking with her, and then we're all going to have one big conversation.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right. Awesome. Thank you so much. And finally, I have, and I hope I don't butcher this. And if I do, ma'am, please correct me. Tijisti? Am I close?
Yeah, you're very close. You're very
I'm close. All right. I was trying to make it happen. Say it for me so I can get it right.
Sure. Tigisti.
Tigisti.
Yep, you said that perfect.
Beautiful.
That's
I like that.
I know you're an oratorian.
I try a little bit. So, Tigisti, tell me a little bit about where you're from and what you do.
So, also an immigrant.
Okay.
First generation. I am from.
I love this.
Africa is repping today. I'm an Eritrean, born in East Africa. Eritrea is located in the northern part of Ethiopia. It was a part of former Ethiopia. Moved to Sudan, spent some time there, and then Canada, and then New York. So I've spent the majority of my life in New York, in Brooklyn, so to speak.
Okay.
Spent quite a bit of time in activism, ranging from neuroscience, like working in developmental neuroscience and addressing the the mental health disparities and the impact of like stress and depression on maternal outcomes and fetal outcomes
Okay.
our Black and Brown communities. And then moving on to education, where I was a teacher for many years. And then now I'm working as a neuropedagogy specialist. So basically, I train teachers and staff in schools about the impact of trauma, emotional trauma, and the way that it impacts Black and Latinx communities, specifically generational trauma and how the brain behaves in regards to that, and the best methods in reaching students for best outcomes. So that's what I do now.
Gotcha.
Also a creative writer, a poet, and put out a book last year called Love in the Time of Polaroids, dealing with intersectionality and the issues of immigration, Black women, Blackness, sexuality, and Black family.
I love it. I love it. Thank you. Thank you so much. I heard Brooklyn and I was like, you know, I moved to, I'm new to Brooklyn, kind of, I guess. You can't read.
Where you from?
You either get it or you don't. I'm in Brooklyn now, but yeah, I moved here. I'm from Atlanta.
Nice. Okay, what part of Brooklyn you in? I gotta come.
Bed-Stuy.
Oh, you're not far. You right where I work.
Okay. Okay. All right. We'll connect. All right. So thanks for that background, and I'm going to start with the first question for you. I anticipate the answer being a little different, but being a first generation American, growing up in New York City, is amazing. I wish.
Atlanta's
when was the first time that you knew that you were indeed a Black woman?
I was born a Black woman. I always knew.
Okay.
Knew I was Black. In my culture, in the section of Africa where I'm from, we don't speak about it in terms of saying that it's Black, but you're very, very much aware of your place in your culture and your relationship to your ancestors. Through the practice of your culture, through the language, through the use of the specific words that you use and the way that you understand that they have power, through naming ceremonies, through rituals, all these different things that have been stripped of Black people in America through slavery.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I always knew. I did not know what the word nigga meant, and I'm gonna say nigga because that's what they call it.
It's totally it's okay.
But I didn't know because English was the third language that I learned. So by the time I learned English, I'd already been speaking 2 other languages. And so, you know, I remember going to a predominantly white school in Canada, and there was a white guy, a student, and he would, you know, first of all, I was afraid of him because I didn't encounter people that looked like him to that extent.
Okay.
Who were colonized, but they didn't dominate all aspects of our society.
Gotcha.
And he was redheaded, he had freckles and green eyes, and I used to run away from him because I didn't understand that physicality. I didn't encounter it. But he used to chase me, and he would always call me a nigga. He would say, nigga, black cow, brown cow, you make chocolate milk, black Barbie.
How old were you?
I was 11 years old. I didn't know what any of that meant, and I did not know enough, or I knew better than to be ashamed of my skin. And so he would say these things, and my father speaks 8 languages. So I went home one day and I said, Dad, what's a nigga? Like, this guy just keeps saying nigga. What's a nigga? He said, what? He called me like,
he's like, what the hell?
You know, and eventually I dealt with it, maybe not in the best way. I ended up, you know, beating him up the next day, following him on the bus and whatnot, but he never did it again.
It's not new for them to be able to catch these hands. That's,
you know what I'm saying?
I got you.
Because I did not relate to the definition that he was attributing my skin tone to.
Sure.
He would say things like, your skin is so brown, nobody wants to be near you because it looks like poop. It looks like crap. And so nobody wants it to rub off on them. And now we got everybody wanting it to rub off on them.
Yeah, I think that, you know, this is so interesting to me because this experience is not abnormal for people in Black skin to have at age 11,
Mhm.
at age 9. Like
Yeah.
these things start early, and we don't talk enough about it for people to even know that this. And I think that there are people that know because they teach it and they perpetuate it, and so it's not a surprise when they hear that it's been done. But we're now in this time that everyone's sensitive about it, but we also have to be very careful with that because appeasement is not change. Appeasement is not, and we can't confuse that with that.
No.
I'm interested. So you had that experience at 11,
Mhm.
and then you continued on and you moved into your higher education. When you started working into or looking into studying the first field, did you face any opposition at that point?
Not at all. I was not. And this is where the family is the first place in which you get education. I was not taught in my family that there was any kind of barrier to anything that I wanted to study. My father told me at a very young age that I was a genius, so I had no question. And so that was one thing, but I was keenly aware of history and the history that I needed to study in relationship to Black people in America, because that's a very different thing from Black people in Africa, Black people in Canada, Black people in the Caribbean. We're interconnected, but there's this idea of separation that's created. And if you do not study the history, you don't know. And so I started to study the history because that history was not brought into, so my major is psychology, that history is not brought into the psychology. So we're looking at research studies that are done on, that are speaking from a white perspective.
Wow.
We don't know what the Black perspective is.
I never thought about it, or I have never thought that deep into it, right? So we know that our history is left out of so many things. And so we kind of focus on that from a truly historical standpoint. But when you talk about psychological history and how the differences, and then you're taught it one way, I can't imagine how do you even respond to that? Like, are you?
Well, you're naturally, I mean, initially I'm confused. I don't understand why, we're talking about all of these research studies or these ideas, but these ideas are being used to push a white consensus, a white way of behaving. And so if you behave differently, then, there's something wrong with you. But have we studied the disparities in our community? Have we studied the disparities in the allocation of resources? Have we studied the trauma and the impact of slavery? Have we studied inferior schooling? And the truth is, they're not going to study that for us. We have to do it for ourselves, and we can't wait for them. Just like history is written and impacted by the people who write it, and so therefore it's their perspective, and we take that for their word. But until we start writing our own history and doing our own research studies, so that's why I was compelled to go into developmental neuroscience, and I worked at Columbia, and I published a few studies. I am not a doctorate, but I worked with some leading doctorates on the impact on minority communities, on the indigenous people, on Black and brown communities in New York. But that's how I dealt with that frustration. And if you seek it out, you can find it. There are pockets, but it's nowhere near where it needs to be.
Got it. Riveting. Like, really, meeting you is just, it's very stimulating. And so thank you so much for joining the conversation. We're gonna Tagisti. Stay with me, okay? Stay with me. So we're gonna lay right here, right? We're gonna bring all the ladies together, and we're gonna start to have some conversation, just literally about the truth about the differences and the collectiveness of us all, right? We are often looped together, and you hear things like the Black agenda, and who first of all designated that there was just one, and that we all ascribe to the same one, right? Like, why is it just the Black agenda? And there's so many other things that it's just like Black people do this, Black people do this. And I said this yesterday. It's something that I say anytime I'm working with younger people, and I've even said it to colleagues. When you are Black and you do something, I believe that now Black people do it. because people, especially kids, that talk a certain way or present a certain way or interested in certain things, they hear, especially in this country, oh, Black people don't do that, and Black people don't do that. And I think that's something that we just got to cut, because it's taking away from the greatness that we are. I'm thrilled that you guys decided to participate today. And the first question that I'm going to ask you is probably going to be a different answer from everyone. And I want to know, just from your standpoint, you don't have to kind of speculate what anyone else thinks. And it's a serious question, I think, that we can kind of dive into, because people have so many of them. And I'll start with you, Iris. What do you think the most common, and I'm not really talking stereotypes, but I was just mentioning, people say things like Black people don't do this, Black people don't do this. What do you think, from your experience, is one of the largest misconceptions people have about Black women?
I would say that we are always expected to be strong, to be self-resilient, that we can't be vulnerable. I think everything around us, and how we're thought about as Black women, being the head of households, from the context of slavery to civil rights to even now, that's what I would probably say is the biggest misconception. Just Black women always expecting to hold their own all the time. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Thank you. Dr. Ubesi,
Right.
same question. Hey.
So one of the phrases that I kind of would like to put to rest is that Black women are always the last to be chosen. That is not true. Black women are thriving. Let me say it again. Black women are thriving. We choose what we want to do. We do what we want to do. We go after what we want to go after. A lot of times people don't like that because they feel uncomfortable with our strength, our beauty, our intelligence, our bodies, our lips, our everything, okay? We are thriving, and we're not the last to be chosen. We just don't choose you.
Ooh.
Oh,
Lovely. Thank you so much. And Tagisti.
Look at you. Look at you. Amazing. One thing that stands out to me is the idea that Black women are angry or bitter, which is not the case. But for whatever reason, there's this expectation that if we speak our minds, all of a sudden it's anger and it's aggression. And then, when society wants to like hypersexualize us, then we're no longer the angry women. And so that's definitely something that I think people should consider. And I think giving voice to Black women as much as possible can remove that element of thinking that we're angry all the time into, I wonder if they're saying something. We are the mothers of civilization. So of course you need to listen.
Got it. Well, I think my next question is really just bouncing off of what you said there. What is it like? Because I don't think people will do this unintentionally and just will assume Black women are angry. And so for that reason, just as you said, Dr. Ubesi, they think that you're angry. So they assume that the Black woman was the last one to be chosen because she's too angry to be here. And it all kind of goes together. But how, in the face of that, how do you stand against that? Or how do you, what's typically the response? Or what response, I guess, do you have in the moment? And what response do you have after the moment that someone has assumed that you were angry? Tagisti.
Articulate, and be as precise as possible in your language. And if you want me to say it in another language, then I will. What I will not do is change my message. And so we cannot cower down. We cannot be silent to make others comfortable and to make others feel good about whatever injustices are going on. Or to even address the fact that we exist and we deserve pleasure and we deserve joy. And that's not, we shouldn't even have to say that we deserve it. And so I think that when these situations come up, we need to turn that eye inward for other people and inquire and just be really precise in the ways in which we inquire. Why do you feel that I'm angry?
Right.
What about me is upsetting you? And that, I think, can build a framework for reflection.
Very excellent. I think, and I'm going to switch gears just for a second. Something that impacts us all is really how, not just our culture, but how that culture is applied to our upbringing. And so in the previous series, one of the recurring themes that I saw in every man that came, like I think out of maybe 12, I think about 10 of them had the same stance, or they could attest to the fact that they were expected to be an adult before they were ready. And so they felt the pressure at age 8 or age 9 because something happened in the family, or there was just a situation that caused them to grow up faster than they felt like they should have. And they felt robbed in a sense. Have you ever had that experience, or did you ever feel that pressure? Most of those men specifically, well, I'd say half of them at least, were probably descendants of slaves here in America, and the other first generation. But the experience was similar amongst them all. Iris, did you ever feel like you were pressured to grow up too soon?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think I will definitely say that Black boys and Black girls are hypersexualized at very young ages, and we can see that, in the school to prison pipeline with Black girls getting higher rates of detention, or their educators deeming them as threats at a very early age. That is a good question.
I can come back to you.
Yeah, you can come back to me.
I'll come back to you because I think it's a good question, but it's also a good conversation. Like, why do these kids feel this way? What happened? Was it justified? Is there some type of healing required, afterwards?
Right.
Dr. Ubesi, did you ever feel like you had to grow up faster than you needed to, or did you ever feel that pressure?
That's an interesting question. So being a first generation from Nigerian parents, grew up in a pretty sheltered household. Okay. And I went to college at the age of 18, and I was just like, I was so green, so naive. Thank God I didn't get into any type of trouble. God covered me. But going into college, I think that was when I was kind of forced to grow up quickly. And I'm going to go off of what Iris was saying, that we're hypersexualized. And when you leave the cocoon of your parents and you're out in the world and you're African-American, male or female, you're automatically seen as this person that is associated with sexuality. And you are exposed to all of these things as a young child. You're still a child at 18, 19, 20, and you're exposed to all of it, and you're expected to know how to handle this without any type of basis of education or support or encouragement. But for me, I was able to go through that because I had good parents, I had good friends, I had a good support system. Where I really felt like I was forced to grow up is when I was exposed to trauma. And that goes back to my medical school experience. I was exposed to that trauma based on racial disparity. And I think when a lot of young individuals or even adults are first time they're exposed to something that's significantly traumatic to their life, they're forced to go into a mature response. And if they do not get the therapy and the education and the support to work through those feelings and how to navigate that area, they end up having post-traumatic stress syndrome. And what happens is they never mature. They never grow up. They are kind of stuck in that era when they experience that trauma. And I think that's what we're seeing a lot today with Black women and men.
Thank you. I agree. I think it causes a lot of trauma, and I think in so many situations we find people that are in situations that they should be able to handle, and that trauma kind of impacts the way that they deal with those situations. Tagisi, same question. Did you ever feel like you had to grow up sooner than you needed to?
I mean, certainly, I think to be a Black person in America means that you are required to grow up sooner than you need to, because you're constantly bombarded with this imagery of people being shot and killed. You're constantly bombarded with like inefficient housing, inadequate schooling, all of these different aspects that you shouldn't have to think about, but you see it visualized all around you and you see it manifest. And so you do end up thinking about it. And especially when we talk about police brutality and the killings that occur, you know, I work in education and neuropedagogy. A huge part of it is looking at a trauma-informed approach to how we teach students and understanding that. And so, you know, we had the George Floyd situation, and I'm having to talk to eighth graders and just unpack that with them, because they now see themselves in George Floyd. So you don't have a choice. It's just forced upon you. And I think that is the greatest tragedy that we have in our society. And so, like Dr. Ubesi said, I think, you know, trauma, understanding that trauma is not just physical, but also emotional, but also understanding that trauma is not confined to a white definition, because white folks will tell you, oh, I can't go into this grocery store. I'm traumatized by it. I don't really like it. Okay, cool. And there's all these different things that are offered to them to help them deal with perceived trauma. But the real trauma of living and dying and being killed is something that America has not made room for, especially for Black and Latinx people. And so, you know, we really need to look at how we provide these support systems that are going to allow people to deal with these traumas. Because the reality is, and from what I know of the brain, and Dr. Ubesi, you can attest to this, is, you know, your amygdala, which is like your survival instinct, the fight, flight, freeze response, that is activated consistently according to what is in your hippocampus, which controls your memory.
Right.
So those two are so intertwined that when you are in a situation, automatically, for you, brother, you get stopped by the cops, automatically your hippocampus says, I've seen this before. I know how it could go. And so your amygdala is now activated, and you're now thinking fight, flight, freeze. What do I do? I don't know. And because of that impact, your executive functioning skills are no longer happening, meaning that your frontal cortex, which is like what helps you make decisions and logical decisions and respond appropriately, it doesn't function as well because you're so wrapped up in surviving. And so the cop may ask you a question and you're not responding properly because you've been traumatized. And now he thinks you're hiding something, and that just escalates. So, you know, this is why trauma-based neuro and trauma-informed approaches to supporting our people are so important, because without it, we have a slew of people that grow up constantly, you know, with their amygdala going like this, like you're in constant danger looking around.
I would like to just quickly, can I just go add to that? She had said something that is very, very important. When you are in a constant state of survival, you cannot, and I love this word, you cannot use your executive function to do things that people that are not in survival are doing. So therefore, if I'm just going to take education, for example, if you are a doctor in training and you are constantly fighting racial disparity, constantly fighting politics based on your color, you're not learning. You are in survival mode. You are trying to just survive. So the brain function that you need to actually learn the information to take care of a human being, you're not learning it. But that's to you. What it looks like from the outside is that you're just not capable of learning. And so there's a lot of Black and brown doctors, lawyers, people in high education that aren't able to get through that threshold because no one understands that they're just trying to survive in life itself. Forget trying to learn X, Y, and Z. They're just trying to keep their head above water because they're being attacked from every single angle because of the color of their skin.
Can I just say one thing? It's going to be like 10 seconds, brother. I just
I'm
want
gonna let you get it in. Get it in. I got one more question.
all right. All I want to say is this. White people are consistently validated in terms of how they feel. You can see it in the grocery stores. You can see it in the parks. You can see it from a very young age. And so when what you feel is consistently validated, you're able to deal with it and you understand it. When you are Black, nobody wants to hear how you feel. Nobody wants to hear that you're upset. Nobody wants to hear that you miss your dad or your mom, or this is happening, or you don't have this, you don't have that. And for that reason, you're unable to deal with it. And so the very first step also is acknowledging that when we say Black Lives Matter, it's all encompassing. That includes emotions, that includes trauma, and that starts from a very young age.
Sure. And I think you kind of just jumped into my territory, because my next question, and I actually have so many questions and not enough time. But the question I want to drop before we get out of here is, I think all three of you will probably have different answers, and I think that adds to what we want to accomplish here. I have so many questions now, but this one, I want to get this one out. What conversation collectively would you, from your perspective, and this could be from your circle, this could be from, I don't, your environment, whatever, what conversations are we not having about Black girls and Black women in our society today? And Iris, we can start with you. If you think there's a conversation missing that we're not having, because we're having lots of conversations, especially in these heightened times right now, right? Where we have demands and they're giving us diversity and inclusion, but we have demands and they're giving us diversity and inclusion. We're not asking for that. We're asking for, whatever. But we're having so many conversations right now, but I do believe that there are some conversations about Black girls that probably need to be had more commonly and more insight. Like, we see conversations about so many other cultures, white people specifically, at the forefront of everything. We kind of know things that are going on with their 8-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds at every angle, every magazine commercial, you see them first, and that's where we are. But there are conversations that are had amongst the collective American community, and then within different culture sets. What conversations do you think are missing amongst both, I think, younger girls and Black women?
That's a good question. I would say probably, in my own personal work and experience, I would say just more of a gender perspective in terms of environmental racism, in terms of climate justice. I think that's never talked enough about.
Wow, good one.
So that's what I would probably say. And yeah, just more, now we're seeing more research and studies happening about the effects, the disproportionate effects of COVID-19 on pregnant women, Black women, Hispanic women, how that's affecting us. So I just think more gender-focused conversations on our inequities, climate justice, health, public health, all of that. It's just more of a gender perspective on those inequities. Yeah.
Great. I think a great answer, great response, great conversations that need to be had. Dr. Ubesi, same question.
Thank you. Yes, I would definitely agree with Iris for both genders as far as the health disparity goes, but specifically for African-American young girls, they are not being supported enough from a mental health and physical health aspect. They are not loving the hair that grows out of their head. They're not loving the rotundness of their behind. They're not loving what God has brought them into the world as. And so we have, a lot of young girls looking into how can I, look like one of those Fashion Nova girls, or how can I, get my hair as straight as I can. Like, so, I can, join Karen's group with her straight hair friends. You know, and so we really have to pay attention and seeing the beauty in our young girls and voicing that beauty to them. Whenever I see young girls, not just young African American girls, but also young African American men that come into my realm, whether in the emergency department or in the clinic or in the hospital, what have you, my first thing is, hi, how are you? What's your name? Are you in school? What are you doing in school? And I always end with a positive affirmation, especially with the young girls. I always tell them, you are beautiful. You are going to be successful. I don't care what nobody says, you can do this, that, and the other, and you will succeed, okay? And so I make a point to do that because young girls, young Black girls don't hear that every day. And they need to.
Got you. Thank you so much. Tagasi.
Yeah, you got it. You went backwards.
No, I got that.
Yeah.
Good memory. Same question. What conversations need to be had amongst young women or are we not having about younger Black women? What conversation could be happening between or should be happening between Black women right now?
Yeah, I agree with my sisters here. And I think they said a lot of what I've often thought about. But I do think that Africa is the seed. I know Africa is the seed. And so a deeper connection to their roots, culturally relevant pedagogy, culturally relevant material that helps them connect to a deeper purpose and a deeper connection with who they are. Because I think that when we go searching for love in ways that are unhealthy for us as young Black women, myself included, it is because we have lost touch with our roots. And so I'm not saying that, it needs to be fists up and afros all the time or anything of that nature, but they need to encounter themselves in what it is that they learn. They need to encounter their ancestors every day that they go to school. And having that connection is a source of empowerment. And the second thing is economic empowerment. Yeah. Don't just say you're giving young girls empowerment because you're now teaching them dance and you're now teaching them TikTok and you're doing this. That's cool. That's great. I'm talking about entrepreneurial empowerment that can last, that can create generational wealth. And so, those two elements, I think, can serve to really build a foundation for the next generation of girls that are coming.
Got you. Mm-hmm. Listen, I think all these conversations are amazing. And I have so many questions, and as we continue to have these conversations, and hopefully, we want this conversation to continue. So, not after the show concludes, if you're watching it, listening to it on the podcast, or watching a replay, take this conversation to your text group. I know we're not a lot of virtual interacting right now, but you can have these conversations with each other. And ladies, I hope that you will continue to join us to have these conversations. I've got 30 seconds apiece, but I want you to give words for, or if you have anything that you would tell a Black woman that's embarking on adulthood, words that you feel like she may need to hear just to move forward. And Iris, again, I'll start with you.
You're always starting with me. Okay. I would say pick and choose your tribe really wisely. That's what I would say. And also be mindful of your tribe and also your outer circles as well. Pay attention to who you have in those inner circle, outer circle, because they make the difference as well. So, yeah.
Good words. Great words. Tagasi.
Agitate, as Frederick Douglass put it, agitate, speak your truth. Agitate, 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 write, speak, run, dance, yell, scream, speak your truth.
Yeah.
So dope, so dope. And thank you so much. Dr. Ubesi, words for a young Black woman embarking on adulthood.
Hey, little one, you are beautiful, you are intelligent, you are smart. Whatever he said is not true. Whatever they said is not true. Keep fighting, keep speaking, you will win.
Wow. Ladies, first of all, thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you for being raw and truthful and honest and transparent. I think if we don't have conversations like this and we don't dictate into our culture and speak this type of life, because interacting and having conversations conversations that push things forward, not just our culture, but our spirits and our minds and our bodies. It pushes everything together. And so, Dr. Kanene Ubesi,
Yes.
Iris Crawford, and Tagisi,
Yeah.
thank you so much for coming to Unmuted Nation. We're going to put all of your contact information out so that people can connect with you. If you have published work, research, or books, if you're working on projects, please share them with us and we will share them with our community.
Cool. Thank
Thank you,
you.
ladies.
Thank
so much
you.
in this forum. We really appreciate that.
Thank
Yeah.
you so much.
Thank you so much for being here. Thank you all. Thank you all three of you.
All right.
And we're out of time. This is Black Woman Hear Me Part 2, and day 3 continues tomorrow. So download the Boss FM radio app. Listen to Unmuted Nation weekdays at 1 p.m. All week we'll be here at 7:30 p.m. With phenomenal Black women making a difference, Black women pushing the culture forward. And we'll continue to do it right here at Unmuted Nation, okay? This episode or this show will air tomorrow at 1 p.m. On the Boss FM radio app, and you can download the Boss FM radio app or find the Unmuted podcast anywhere you can listen to a podcast. All right, that's gonna do it for tonight. Remember, today is greater. Believe it, speak it, and live it. You have to make the choice to be great. Your situation is not your destination, so instead make it your motivation. You guys have a great night, and we'll see you tomorrow. Hey.